Hello everyone and welcome to Underwater Adventures with Alex Mirabal. Today we will talk about challenging wreck sites. All wreck sites are challenging, but wreck sites that are particularly challenging for the team or for the researchers for different reasons. I have selected 5 of them from these wreck sites I have visited and worked on. So let's dive into it.
Hey everyone, if you want to watch the video in other languages, you simply click on settings, go to subtitles, select the subtitles in the original language, then go back to subtitles, activate the translate automatically, and scroll down and select your preferred language. In this case, we chose Spanish, obviously. Thank you so much all, and let's get on with the video.
Lady Burgess sunk between the islands of Mayo and Boa Vista in Cape Verde in 1806. The Lady Burgess was a British ship that was transporting mainly medical supplies from England to Madras in India to set up a hospital. She ran aground in a place that is called today João Valente Reef, but it was known at the time as a Letton Rock. This is like a peak, it's like an underwater mountain that comes all the way to the surface, and it has a very small area in which gets to the surface. So everything around is the deep Atlantic Ocean, and waves crash there with the entire force. There is no coral barrier or there is any platform that will slow down the waves or break the waves a bit. So I have selected this one to talk as one of the challenging wrecks because of these conditions. The Lady Burgess we located, actually, it was shown to me by a very good friend, the French diver and spear fisherman Alain Urtbitz, who has been living in Cape Verde since many years, and he was my dive supervisor in the team that I have in Cape Verde. So he knew the wreck because he was there spear fishing with some colleagues, and he have seen the cannons and has seen anchors and, well, wreck material. So we went there together with the team, our boat, trying to figure out which ship it was and if it was interesting from the historical point of view. And we arrived to the place, and immediately just arriving there, and the hardship of anchoring our boat in a safe place to be able to dive safely in the wreck and come back to the boat was already the first challenge. When we saw those conditions and when we jump into the water, imagine that this is a less than a square mile area in the middle of the ocean when waves are coming from every direction. So you have a sort of washing machine in the place that you jump in the water and try to figure out anything of the wreck. You can only wonder when you dive in this place what would have happened to the people who run aground there in the night, probably with bad weather as well, because there is always bad weather there. I mean, even if the weather is good, you have these massive waves coming into the side and pushing you really hard. For us, just the sight of seeing how the area is, it really gives you the chills. You are swimming and diving in the place and imagining how frightening should have been that night when the ship ran aground. We explored the area. It was not such a big area to explore. The elements of the ship, cannons and anchors, and she had also a cargo of lead ingots, long lead ingots in form of a bar, about 50 kilos each. That was all spread. You can imagine the strength of the waves when everything was spread for long distances, even very heavy objects. We faced the difficulties of excavating, exploring first and then excavating this wreck because even if the water was very clear, that was not an issue. Waters were great. You could see long distances and orientate yourself under the water. But the strength of the wave was something we had to adapt to be able to excavate the wreck. For instance, the normal or the regular system of putting grids on the seabed, squares, and you can organize your excavation, it was an impossible task. Whatever you put there would be blown in the next wave. It doesn't matter how strongly you can hammer it on the seabed, this thing will be taken out of place. So as a guidance for your excavation, it was not good. So we started using the natural features of the place. There were holes in the seabed, there were gullies that they were filled with wreck material. There was not part of the wreck or artifacts or anything in the flat seabed. Whatever remained at the moment of the sinking in the flat seabed will be pushed by the waves to these natural collectors, as we call them, these gullies, these holes, these kind of wells in some places, and everything was accumulated there. So we started getting the location, the position of these natural features to be able to control the excavation. What are we excavating? Where this object is coming from? So the normal, that's what I have mentioned in other videos, that no two wrecks are alike. In this case, you couldn't place your normal grid system or the more regular grid system. Now we are working with the shapes of the seabed, the features of the seabed. Other of the challenges for the expedition was how to get the divers into the working place and recover them after the dive safely. Because obviously most of the remains of the ship were in the shallowest part of the reef. I mean, the most dangerous area. So we came all in the Zodiac from the mothership, which was a little bit further. We came all in the Zodiac, wait for the waves to recede a bit. You know that waves have certain sets. There are like 5 or 6 waves that are all the same, and then suddenly come 3 or 4 which are bigger. Okay, we have to calculate that, get to the point where we have placed a buoy, a marker, get to the point, drop the divers quickly, and this boatman has to speed out the best he can so he cannot get trapped in the next set of waves. So once you're down there, try to find a place to grab yourself and stay stable on the seabed so you can have control on your excavation. You cannot be removing this object or changing or excavating in this place and suddenly be pushed by a wave for 10 meters this direction and then coming 10 meters this direction because you already lose what you were doing. So that was also really challenging. We worked like crabs in the coast that you see that they are tied to the rock and they are very strongly attached to the rocks. Holding on, and the waves coming back and the crab is there. Well, the same we try to do, sometimes more successfully, sometimes less. And the recording of the real position of the objects on the seabed was a nightmare. We measure, for instance, distance between 2 cannons. We measure distances today, and we have to measure the distance tomorrow. It's not because of the cannons were moving, it's because the accuracy of your measurement is very low. You have this measuring tape that when a wave comes, then the measuring tape goes like this, and it's giving you 5.4 meters when actually it's 5 meters. So with doing it every day and, getting more samples, we got closer to the truth. But it was a very interesting wreck because in these conditions, it was unfortunately not salvaged at the time. So there were many of the things that the ship was bringing to Madras in India. We found plenty of medical instruments and appliances for a hospital, 1806, which were super interesting from the research point of view, but they could not be recovered at the time of the accident. We found, unfortunately, this was one of the few wrecks I have worked, which we found human remains. There was an unfortunate person that got tangled or got trapped with a piece of the ship that it was a big iron beam that it was almost a complete skeleton of a person underneath in a hole. That also, there was a large amount of gold coins that we found from this hole. It makes us think, this is nothing totally proven, but make us think that this person was carrying all these gold coins in their pockets. They can be incredibly heavy, and it didn't calculate that it will be difficult to swim or get away from the ship with the pockets full of gold coins, and unfortunately died there. That wreck was that scary, even for today's standards, and we trying to work with the best safety measures possible. So that has been one of the most challenging wrecks I have worked. Another challenging wreck was the Suban Rec, known as the Suban Rec. This is a ship sunk midway between the island of Java and Kalimantan in the Java Sea in Indonesia. The reasons why this wreck is challenging is not related, like the Lady Burgess, to big waves or anything. Is because first, it's in the middle of nowhere. There is no immediate support or help you could get, even to go and do the shopping or to buy essentials or supplies for a ship is an issue because it's very far from any harbor or port. It also is a little bit deep for the standards of modern maritime archaeology working with compressed air, with scuba diving. It's 54 meters deep in a very flat and muddy area, which has a lot of suspension in the water. Water is not that clear. So at 54 meters of depth, you will find a very inhibited visibility. You will see very little. There are some currents in the area which are not, it doesn't make it easier to dive at that depth. But the main thing is that that wreck had plenty of artifacts. It was a ship that was loaded with very large cargo. So far, the largest cargo of Chinese Ming porcelain ever found. It was apparently coming from China to the island of Java. There was, in the early 1600s, there was a big market of ceramics and porcelain from Southeast Asia. It was like a local trade. It was not porcelain made to export to Europe. So it was with a very big cargo. We estimated the cargo to be around 750,000 pieces, whatever is left on the wreck. So it was certainly a very heavy ship at the moment, and probably a storm or something. We don't know the name of the ship yet. We haven't been able to find the name of the ship. We know the time in which the ship went down. The causes probably have been a storm or something, because she was so heavily loaded that water should have come in quite easily. So with this large amount of artifacts on the seabed, any excavation must be very delicate. You have to be very accurate and very thorough in the way you plan your excavation. But the depth now puts you the challenge. You have very short bottom time. You have very short time in which you can be at the wreck. For instance, a normal dive in the morning in that wreck will give you 12 minutes in the wreck, and then approximately 1.5 hours of decompression, meaning from the wreck to your boat, you will spend 1.5 hours, and you stay only 12 minutes on the bottom. There are very few things you can do in 12 minutes. We needed a large number of divers. The dive ships were very short on the bottom, but still you have more than an hour of decompression before getting to the boat. And that was in the morning. In the afternoon, when we make the second dive, when you still have some of the residual nitrogen on your bloodstream, the dive is shorter, so it's only 8 minutes in the afternoon, up to 2 hours of decompression. So each time that any of us got into the water, you are for sure that you will spend about 2 hours in each dive. You will be able to do very little work on the seabed, and you will come back to the ship shivering of cold, even if the water was 29 degrees. It was a very warm water, but low visibility down there, low light, the water gets a little bit colder, then plus the long time that you have to spend in the deco without doing anything. You're just standing there for 2 hours, hanging on a rope and praying for the time to pass quickly. So that was a very big challenge, mainly for the archaeologist and operation manager, in this case myself, plus a couple of colleagues, that we have to set up such a system in which we could compensate this little time, this very short time that you have on the seabed to do a proper work. And how could we compensate that? More divers? Well, more divers bring also other issues. How it was a very, very challenging wreck. In this case, we didn't excavate it. We just made the inspection of the wreck that took 2 weeks. Because of these conditions, it took 2 weeks to make the site plan, make the photos of the site, the measurement, the proper measurement, the estimate of artifacts down there, and do a proper archaeological assessment of the site, which normally you can do in a wreck. If you have the proper team, you could do it in 3, 4, 5 days, depending on the complexity of the site. In this case, it took us 2 weeks because of these short bottom time conditions that we had. So sometimes you have challenges which are not the ones you expect, but in this case was the depth. So this was another very challenging wreck in my career. The Princess Louisa is a wreck that cannot be missing in this list. It was, on top of it, the first wreck I worked going out of the nice Caribbean conditions. The Princess Louisa sunk in 1743. It was a British ship that was carrying a cargo of silver coins and lead also. And it sunk in the north coast of Mayo, in the island of Mayo in Cape Verde. That reef today where she sank is known as Punta de Galeão. So it's like the reef of the galleon. So important was the Princess Louisa in the moment that she sank that gave name to that particular geographical feature. The main issue with the Princess Louisa is that the Princess Louisa is in that reef that is about 3 to 4 meters deep, and it has everyday wave of 3 or 4 meters waves. So we are in the situation, if the Lady Burgess was like a washing machine, this was a washing machine on steroids. It was really challenging, not only to dive in the place, but only the ride in the Zodiac in our auxiliary boat, from our ship to the wreck side. It was really challenging and dangerous. We got flipped twice, but the boat completely flipped. We learned after the first one that we have to clip our gear, the entire gear. You have to clip it in the boat, so when the boat goes upside down, at least the things are not lost. So we have to put it back, and the things are hanging from the Zodiac.
So you don't have a double expedition for the wreck and
expedition
for your
to
materials.
recover your own stuff. So, yeah, it was exactly like that, and we, the divers team, I could tell from the short ride from the mothership to the wreck side how nervous people were. And this is something you don't want when you have a team of divers and you have to do a thorough task, as excavating an archaeological site is. You cannot have the divers worrying about their own safety instead of doing the work they have to do. So first thing was to try to set the site in a way that we all felt safe. I mean, we installed some big, thick ropes in the place that you could manage yourself climbing more than swimming, because swimming in these conditions is practically impossible. When you have large masses of water sweeping the area from one place to the other, you cannot overcome that with your fins. You really have to grab on the seabed to move. Thankfully, the reef is a place that you have many ways to grab yourself, but you can also harm yourself with the edges of the coral and rocks, which are very sharp. So we have to install some of these aids for us to, let's say, climb, not climbing, it's not, but like dragging ourselves all the way out to deeper waters where the boat is waiting for you because the boat cannot come and pick you up in the breakers. So that was a wreck in which every task that you plan to do, let's say next morning, we are excavating now the square S2, where we have to go through the seabed, to the bedrock. All that passed through the decision in who will do it, when do we do it, if there is high tide that we need to wait because then it's a little bit more water over you and you are a little bit safer. What happened when the wave moves one diver from where it is? It happens to us one with a very good colleague of mine, Martin Woodward, is an English researcher also with a lot of experience in working in the sea. And him and I, we were passing, we were doing a survey around the wreck and he was hanging behind the Zodiac in a rope and being towed by the Zodiac in a sledge for him to see the seabed. I was maneuvering the Zodiac, he was in the water. In the moment that I went to pick him up to start another track, a wave came out of nowhere. It's a gigantic wave and he was still half on the Zodiac, the other half in the water, and we got the Zodiac this side moving super fast to the rocks. And I was thinking I will lose Martin in this one. I mean, it was so bad. Hopefully it didn't happen. We went back to normal position. The Zodiac was full of water. Martin managed to get in the Zodiac and slowly and painfully we went out of that area. That is with two people on board at least. I mean, we had another person with us, but with two people who has a lot of experience in the sea. I was watching the waves. I was trying to be on the safe side because I have Martin in the water. Still, we almost lost it in that particular case because waves came sometimes out of nowhere, and in these kind of very shallow places and with this massive oceanic wave coming to the reef, you could expect some of these rock waves, I think they are called. So Princess Louisa, mainly because of that, and then because we also had in the excavation to recover the cargo of these lead bars, which were about 50 kilos each. That was a wreck that produced a lot of discomfort in the team, starting by myself and then with all the divers. We got our hands smashed every day, bruises in the legs, all the way up to the knees, deep bruises, cuts. It was a very challenging wreck to work. But it's coincidentally, it's not because of the depth, but it's because of the shallowness. It's too shallow in a place which is too rough. So there you have other reason why a wreck could be challenging, and in this case is because it's too shallow. Now I will talk about the Bangka Strait wreck. The reason why the wreck is in this list is not any similar to the ones before. It's because it is sunk in the Bangka Strait. It's the strait that divides the islands of Bangka and Sumatra in Indonesian archipelago. But the Bangka Strait is very, very muddy. The water is very, very dark and black and full of mud in the water column. It's not a matter of inhibited visibility. There is no visibility to talk about. There is no visibility. I mean, the first time I dove in the wreck was found by fishermen, and they brought up some porcelain objects. They showed them to us and show us to the wreck. The first day we dove there, Faure and I, we were going down to the rope. It's not even deep. It's about 12 meters deep, so it's considered like a nice depth to work because it's not that deep that your bottom time will shorten, and it's not that shallow that you will get all this discomfort from the waves or anything or ships going over you. It is a nice depth. But we started going down through the rope that we had previously placed on the side to go down, and about 2 meters deep, I was trying to watch my dive computer. I couldn't see my dive computer anymore, and I said, okay, this cannot get worse than that. I was mistaken. It got worse. It goes to the point that when we touched the seabed, when we arrived in the seabed and we touched the seabed, we couldn't see anything. There was literally no difference if you close your eyes or you open your eyes. You could dive without a mask. It was useless, the mask. I mean, we could put the dive computer here and the torch here, and you wouldn't see anything. It was that black, that dense, the amount of sediment that was suspended in the water. Obviously, it was a flat sea, it was great, there was no current, everything was okay, but you couldn't see. The main challenge was, okay, how do we record what is down there? How do we do our job of assessing this wreck and making an evaluation of the site in terms of research? How do we do that if you cannot see anything? So we have to come up with a different system. In this case, it was placing ropes which had knots every meter. So at 1 meter you had 1 knot, at the second meter you have 2 knots, in the third meter you have 3 knots, so you can go through the rope and knowing where you are at that time, at that moment, as much as measuring the arm span of each diver on the surface to know, because you would have the rope on your chest, you're laying on the seabed with the rope in your chest, and you will only work and touch whatever you can touch with your arms here. You will not move from this rope. So you will be touching, and you will have then a sense of at which distance the objects are. It was really challenging to evaluate the density of artifacts in different areas of the site to identify what you were touching. We had this, this very beautiful story, because working in these conditions, it brings up to you all these primeval fears. I mean, you are down there and you're thinking, who knows what?
Primal fears.
Primal fears, yes, that's the right word. It will get you scared from like the kids in the dark room. Mm-hmm. And it's as bad as that. Yeah. And I had this colleague of mine, Yuri, which is a very good friend of mine, but the top of it is he stayed living in Indonesia. He lives in Indonesia now. He's a very good diver and a very good archaeologist. He was excavating, and with the hands he's touching something which is round and has hairs. So imagine when you are in this situation in which you cannot see what you're touching, and you have gloves, but for this kind of careful job you have to take your gloves off because you don't have enough sensitivity in the fingers, so you have to, and he's touching something round and with hairs. Not to mention that in our crew, in our ship, we had plenty of colleagues which were Indonesian, and they have plenty of stories about ghosts and people. Yeah, a lot of superstitions. They have that very in their culture. So we talk about that every day. And Yuri's touching this, that he's obviously thinking is a head, which has hairs and everything, and underneath he touched it, and it has like a mouth. So at that moment, we make the change of shift. We made it by time. The diver who is down there, he cannot get control on his time because he cannot see his computer or his watch. So the diver who will replace him is the one that has to get in the water right in the time to replace the other one. You touch him when you arrive, then he goes back through the same rope and you stay in the place working where he left it. And I was replacing Yuri, so when I touched him to tell him, okay, I'm here, you can leave. I mean, the guy jumped. I could feel it, the way he jumped, because he was in the middle of touching this head with hairs and everything. So he left. I continued working what he has done. I touched the same thing, but I put it in the back, and together with some porcelain objects, and took the measurements as I could, bring the thing up, and then he was in the boat telling the story to everyone, how creepy it was to find this thing that he has no clue what it was. And I came out with my bag with many things inside, together with this hairy, round object, which happened to be no more than a coconut. It was a coconut. They last forever in the water. And this coconut obviously was floating around and ended up there. If you don't see what you're touching, or it could get scary. This was only one of the many anecdotes that we have in that wreck, because of the fact that we couldn't see anything. There was, in like 3 months we spent there was one day that we felt glorious because the water cleaned up a bit and we would have about 20 centimeters of visibility. So you could see things right on your face, which was a great, we took that day to make most of the measurements and to identify some of the objects that they were still a mystery to us because by touching them, you could not tell what they were. So there you have another reason why working on a wreck could be challenging. In this case, visibility, bad visibility or no visibility. And the last wreck that I want to talk about is the Espadarte. The Espadarte is a Portuguese ship sunk in the island of Mozambique in 1558. It was bringing a cargo of Chinese porcelain from Macau, most probably. And she sank in the entry of the harbor of Ilha de Mozambique, of the island of Mozambique. What was the challenging part of this wreck? Well, in Mozambique, in that part where the island of Mozambique is, the difference of tides can be very wide. I mean, you have some days the spring tides can get to 5 meters over the theoretical zero and 5 meters below. So it is a lot of water that has to come out of the harbor and into the harbor every 6 hours. This creates very strong currents, but really strong currents where the wreck is. So to work there, now we have this other challenge. First, you have this difference of depth, which for archaeological work, it's important because you could start the diving in a place which has 2 meters deep and you have your time, your clock measuring that time that you have to make it, you have to make a dive of, let's say, 40 minutes, but the tide is going up and you end up the dive in 6 or 7 meters deep instead of 2. That makes a difference in your dive, and that makes a difference in the work you're doing. But if you add to that the strong current you are exposed to, you have, again, to create a system in which you can anchor yourself on the seabed so the current will not throw you away, and you then are capable of working in the place you want to work. Because when you are excavating a shipwreck, there is a place that you have to work. It's not whatever you like. You have to follow a system. And in the case of the Espadarte, with these very strong currents, for instance, we had to plan some of the more careful tasks. We have to plan them between tides, where when the high tide stops, before start going to low tide, then you have probably about 20 minutes of slack when there is no tide. In these 20 minutes, you have to rush, be there. It doesn't matter which time of the day it is, because this shifts through the days. I mean, like 6 hours, 40 minutes each time. And then you're getting a different time every day with a high tide, and every different time every day with low tide. So you have to plan that. It could be at 2 in the morning that you have to take that chance and take these 20 minutes and just measure from cannon A to cannon B, and from the anchor to this pottery vase. You have to do that when you have no current. You cannot work all the way long because currents can be very tricky in that place. There is an added problem that if a diver loses the grip or the anchoring in which you are, if the current is pushing you in, so let's say it's getting from low to high tide, meaning that the water is coming into the bay, the diver will be pushed to inside the bay. Let's say safer than the other way around. Because if the current is going out of the bay and you lose your grip, you will end up in the middle of the Indian Ocean. It will be very hard to find you. So these are challenges which are present because you are doing an archaeological work. If you want to just go there diving, yes, you can jump in the water and go with the current, and it will be a very pleasant dive. But when you actually have to stay in one place and do a job that it demands your attention, you have to find solutions because you cannot fight these natural elements like currents or visibility or strong waves. You cannot fight that. You have to adapt, and you have to create solutions to be able to do the job that you were there to do. So in this case, it is not the big waves, it is not underwater visibility, it's the strong current. So there you have another reason why a wreck could be challenging. Thank you very much for watching the video. Hope you like it. And then again, I will be checking on the comments. Please, if you have also experiencing other kind of wrecks that could be challenging for different reasons, let me know. We will talk about that. We know that everyone which is working on the sea will have different experience, and these are the things that make our community stronger and that we can learn from each other. So if you have any of these experiences, please share it with us. We will be checking on the comments and making a video whenever you want us to talk about some specific subject. So let's keep in touch and keep on diving.